The Subcommittee on Government Operations and the Subcommittee on Information Technology will come to order, and without objection, the Chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. Thank you so much for being here. My apologies for being a little late coming from votes. We're here today to talk about a very important topic, but one that does not get much attention in the years that don't end in zero. And so as we talk about the census, actually last month the Bureau released its operational plan for the 2020 census. The purpose of this plan was to ensure that the Bureau has all the necessary systems and procedures in place to effectively complete its core mission. As our witness's testimony will indicate, the plan for 2020 is probably the most ambitious census plan in our nation's history. Quite simply, the Bureau is attempting to rewrite how the census is conducted from the ground up, making it easier for people to respond and better value to the American taxpayer, certainly as we look at that. These are laudable and necessary goals, particularly in light of the Bureau's track record. The 2010 census cost some $12.3 billion, or more than $100 per household. This is substantially more than the $8 billion, or the about $70 per household cost of the 2000 year census. In fact, we have to go all the way back to 1970 census to find a census where the cost did not rise dramatically compared to its predecessor. To correct this unsustainable trend, the Census Bureau is attempting to greatly increase its ability to leverage technology, to utilize pre-existing data in a completely new way. Assuming the current designs hold, this will be the first census where Americans will be able to respond through the Internet. It will be the first where non-response follow-up enumerators will be able to collect data electronically and have their cases listed, or their case list updated in real time, and organize their route based on travel efficiency with directions. What a novel idea. It will be the first time that the Bureau will be used both federal, state, and local addresses updates for the past decade to avoid the added expense of a nationwide in-field address canvas. It will also be the first time that the Bureau will use the federal administrative records like tax returns and Medicare information to identify vacant housing units and to encourage self-response. This plan involves sending paper reply forms only to the older individuals that are in areas with poor Internet connectivity. If the Bureau can deliver on its plan, it's believed that the 2020 census could cost less per household than the 2010 census, and almost the same on an absolute level. However, if is the key word in that last sentence, and in preparation for the 2010 census, the Bureau spent some $600 million to build a proprietary handheld device for the enumerators to electronically report the field data. Despite this massive investment of hardworking American taxpayer dollars, poor program management led to the Bureau to abandon that project in its entirety in 2008, forcing them to go back to paper response forms for the 2010 census. The Bureau tells us that it has learned valuable lessons from that failed effort. The initiatives it is hoping to implement for the 2020 census are several times the size and complexity of the program that failed in 2008, and it is why we are here today. Although I know that there are still some questions about how exactly the Bureau will use the administrative records, I feel confident in saying that all of the members on both the subcommittees are broadly supportive of what the Bureau is trying to accomplish. With that in mind, my goal today is to learn more about the Bureau's ongoing initiatives, but also make sure realistic timelines, deadlines, operational controls are in place to avoid the failures of the past. Given the current budget environment, we cannot afford another incident like happened in 2008. But in closing, I would like to thank all of our witnesses, and some of you I've met before, and I'm encouraged to have you with us for your time today, and I look forward to working with you as the clock ticks towards a Census Day of April 1st of 2020. The Chair now recognizes my good friend, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Government Operations, Mr. Conley, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for this joint hearing, which is well-timed given the recent release of the 2020 operational plan for the census. At the midpoint of this decade, it's instructive to look at lessons learned from the last census and the preparations underway for the next. The data derived from the census provides a treasure trove of information, both to the public and private sectors. For the government, census data provides the foundation for our representative system of governance. From Congress down to local school boards, census data is used to prudently and fairly allocate Federal, State, and local dollars to the communities we represent. For businesses, this information informs employment and capital investment decisions, critical for the private sector. The census is one of the few government functions expressly mandated by the Constitution. By the way, so is the Postal Service. And the advent of technology holds the promise of making this once-in-a-decade enumeration less arduous and hopefully less costly. Success will be largely dependent on the management and deployment of technology. The Bureau's botched attempt to deploy mobile handheld devices for the 2010 census actually increased costs by $3 billion. The 2010 census was 56% more costly than its predecessor in 2000. Today, the Bureau is proposing to expand its use of technology. One of the newer initiatives the Bureau believes will produce greater efficiencies and savings is the common-sense step of cross-referencing data from other Federal and non-Federal sources, such as the IRS, the U.S. Postal Service, and others. A county-level test earlier this year showed using such records reduced the follow-up workload at homes known to be vacant by nearly 12%. In addition, the Bureau intends to expand use of modern technology. I hope we hear today what lessons from the 2010 experience with handheld devices are being applied to this new effort. I'm also pleased to finally welcome the census to the 21st century by offering an online response option. Today's high-tech mobile society, people simply expect to be able to conduct business online and in many cases in the palm of their hand with a smart device. I'm encouraged by Mr. Cooper's prepared remarks in which he indicates the Bureau is on track to meet its goals. As the Commerce Department CIO, he is accountable for overseeing the Census Enterprise Data Collection and Processing Initiative, which will integrate and standardize systems and data sharing across the Bureau. I want to congratulate him on his efforts to implement the FITARA Act, better known as Conley-ISA, ISA-Conley, which is guiding IT investments with enhanced risk assessments and performance metrics. Commerce has been a leader among Federal agencies for embracing the new IT management model, and I would welcome his insight on how it has helped, or not, improve preparations for the census. I also look forward to hearing responses from Mr. Cooper and Mr. Thompson, Director of the Census Bureau, to concerns raised by the GAO that the Bureau is not moving quickly enough to achieve certain milestones. For example, GAO has cited gaps in staffing and the deferral of key IT decisions, such as the scope of the IT infrastructure that will be necessary, cybersecurity protocols, and a procurement strategy for the handheld devices. These are important issues that must be resolved soon, as the window of time in which the Bureau has to complete this transformation before end-to-end testing of the system is scheduled to begin in 2018. As Mr. Cooper notes, however, the Bureau has delivered its operational plan 3 years earlier than it did in 2010. And hopefully that allows us time to identify and address gaps or shortfalls well in advance of the deadline. Finally, Mr. Chairman, let me address the elephant in the room, which is the urgency for Congress adequately to fund the census. Providing robust oversight of its operations and these IT investments is a laudable and necessary goal for us, but it is for naught if the Bureau does not have the resources it needs with which to execute its constitutional duty and what has now become a monumental task given the size of our population and the complexity of our country. The initial budget proposal offered by my friends for fiscal year 2016 would have reduced funding for the Census Bureau by $374 million, almost one-third, compared to the President's request. I'm hopeful that last week's bipartisan budget agreement will allow us to restore those necessary investments. We cannot afford to shortchange an activity so fundamental to our democracy and the sustained well-being of our communities. I look forward to hearing from the panel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Conley. The Chair recognizes the Chairman of the Information Technology Subcommittee, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank the distinguished gentleman from North Carolina and Virginia for holding this important hearing today. Every 10 years, the United States Census Bureau administers a very important survey of the American public. It's vital for many reasons. We'll use the gathered information to ensure the proper distribution of government funds and the proportionate number of representatives in government. But in order to make sure the information collected is as accurate as possible, the Census Bureau must deploy the best possible tactics and plans to collect the data. I want to give credit where credit is due. The Census Bureau is attempting to go to great lengths to drive down their costs, and the results will be significant. This is atypical of the culture in Washington, where agencies always seem to be asking for more tax dollars without producing the results that warrant them. The Census Bureau has accomplished this by utilizing existing information and new technology, something that other federal agencies could learn from. But like many federal agencies, the Census Bureau has serious IT challenges that must be addressed and corrected now. First, while the Bureau has made some significant progress in fully staffing its IT department, a number of key leadership positions remain vacant. These positions need to be filled immediately, and I'm looking forward to this hearing today on how the agency plans to address this. Second, the Census Bureau hasn't addressed all the GAO recommendations on improving its IT systems. We saw what happens when agencies ignore IG reports with the massive data breach at OPM. This is a trend that I continually see as chairman of the Subcommittee on Information Technology, federal agencies ignoring IG and GAO recommendations. It is vital that the Census Bureau take action to address all of the remaining recommendations as soon as possible. Finally, I agree wholeheartedly with the GAO and our witness, Ms. Cha, that the Bureau must begin now to make critical IT decisions. Their deferral of decisions in IT so far has, in my view, increased the overall risk around the 2020 census. I look forward to hearing from all of our witnesses today on specific ways we can successfully utilize technology to complete an accurate and cost-effective census in 2020. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. The Chair now recognizes Ms. Kelly, the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Information Technology, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this important hearing. I would also like to extend my thanks to the witnesses here today. The purpose of this hearing, oversight hearing, is to determine if the Census Bureau's plans for 2020 census is sufficient to ensure a complete and accurate count of the nation's population. Getting an accurate count is important. Numerous key decisions are based on data collected from the decennial census. Census data is integral in determining the equitable distribution of federal funds, enforcing civil and voting rights legislation, and determining congressional apportionment, among other things. With advances in technology, we have tools available to help administer the census more efficiently and accurately. For instance, in October 2014, the Bureau began an enterprise-wide IT initiative called the Census Enterprise Data Collection and Processing Program, which is intended to, and I quote, deliver a system of systems to serve all of the Bureau's survey data collection and processing functions, rather than continuing to build and maintain unique survey-specific systems with redundant capabilities. CEDCAP will help re-engineer field work by implementing an operational control system to track and manage field assignments. This will help census takers decide, using real-time data, which houses to visit on a daily basis. CEDCAP will also be responsible for the development of a web-based survey application in order to maximize Internet self-response. The 2020 census will be the first census with the option of responding online. The Bureau will rely heavily on Internet responses as part of its cost-saving initiatives. The Bureau also decided to use mobile devices for field data collection purposes. The Bureau estimates it will save nearly $400 million through the increased use of technology, which is certainly to be commended. While technology can help increase efficiency, which yields significant savings, I am also concerned about the safety of the public's personal information. As you may know, the Bureau experienced a data breach in July. While no sensitive information was stolen, this incident underscores the importance of having controls in place to protect sensitive information. I applaud the Bureau for responding swiftly to the breach and recognizing the need for continued monitoring of their systems. It is our job to ensure that these agencies have the resources they need to keep our private information safe from hackers. Additionally, I share GAO's concern that a number of important IT decisions have yet to be made for the 2020 census. GAO recommends that key IT decisions be made quickly, or we'll find ourselves in the situation we saw in 2010, where a costly IT project went awry, causing turmoil for the entire census operation. I look forward to hearing from the Bureau regarding its ability to meet critical milestones as they finalize plans for 2020, and I look forward to a productive discussion on this vital issue. I yield back the balance of my time, and thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly. I will hold the record open for 5 legislative days for any member who would like to submit a written statement. We will now recognize our panel of witnesses. I'm pleased to welcome the Honorable John Thompson, the Director of the U.S. Census Bureau, Mr. Stephen Cooper, Chief Information Officer at the U.S. Department of Commerce, Mr. Robert Goldenkoff, Director of Strategic Issues at the U.S. Government Accountability Office, and Ms. Carol Cha, is that correct? Director of Information Technology Acquisitions Management Issues at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. Welcome to all. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses will be sworn in before they testify, so if you would please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please be seated. Let the record reflect that the witness has answered in the affirmative, and in order to allow time for discussion, we would appreciate if you would limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. However, your entire written statement will be made part of the record. Mr. Thompson, who I would also say looks an awful lot like Robert De Niro, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Meadows. Chairman Meadows, Chairman Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I'm also pleased to be testifying with Mr. Steve Cooper, the Chief Information Officer of the Department of Commerce, with whom we work very closely. I am honored to serve as the Director of the Census Bureau, which has the tremendous responsibility of administering an accurate census that fairly represents everyone in America. We have reached a major milestone in our preparations for the 2020 census. Just last month, we released an operational plan that allows us to change the way we have conducted the decennial census for over 40 years and save $5.2 billion. For each census since 1970, the paper-based process has been the standard, and it has been increasingly challenged by the growing diversity and complexity of our nation. We do not believe that a paper and pencil approach to the census is sustainable for the 2020 or future censuses. The Census Bureau has concentrated on 4 innovation areas that have the potential to improve census operations and save taxpayers money. I will briefly describe each of these innovation areas. First, we are building a more accurate address list, and for 2020, we have re-engineered the process to incorporate a 100% in-office canvassing that will be supplemented with up to a 25% in-field operation. We have already started this effort, and we expect to realize $900 million in cost savings from this strategy. Second, we want to make it easier for people to respond, and our strategy incorporates not only the Internet as the primary response option, but also an integrated communication and partnership strategy and tailored contact strategies. We will mail an invitation to all housing units encouraging Internet response. For 20% of the addresses, however, in areas with low Internet connectivity, we will be including a paper questionnaire in the first mailing package. We will also incorporate a census questionnaire assistance program with both telephone and web chat response options. We believe that by opening up the process and making it easy, We will encourage participation with respondents who have typically not responded. These efforts offer the potential of approximately $400 million in savings. Third, using existing information already provided to the government, we can reduce door-to-door visits in what we call the non-response follow-up operation. To reduce this workload, we are proposing to use administrative records for enumeration in two ways. We are planning to use administrative records to remove vacant addresses before sending census takers into the field, and we are also planning to use administrative records to enumerate occupied housing units after we have knocked on each door at least once. Using administrative records in this way will result in savings of $1.4 billion. Fourth, we are automating our field operations to save an estimated $2.5 billion. We will now use mobile technology to achieve significant efficiencies in the 2020 census. I should note that we have successfully developed an innovative prototype system. We are now able to provide optimized assignments to our interviewers, including daily route assignments, the best time of day to attempt contact. We are also able to provide the supervisors of these enumerators real-time updates and alerts regarding the progress of the workers they oversee. Supporting these efforts is our enterprise approach to survey and census data collection and processing through shared services, which we call CEDCAP. In the past, duplicative systems were created and used for every survey and census. We will now move to a small suite of shared reusable systems. Based on my experience in overseeing the 2000 census and in the private sector, I am confident we are on course and we have a schedule for all major decisions. Finally, we are committed to protecting the privacy and confidentiality of individual information. The Census Bureau has implemented a robust, comprehensive, and layered cybersecurity program that is constantly evaluated by experts. The last 5 years have provided the groundwork for the 21st century census. And now, looking forward, we must turn our attention to counting every person in America. But still a significant risk we face is receiving adequate funding. If adequate funding is not received in FY16, we will prioritize activities to ensure that the 2018 end-to-end test will take place on time. We are committed to ensuring an accurate census that fairly represents all people in America. If we have to defer activities to later years, the cost of the census will increase. I am confident the Census Bureau can achieve these objectives given congressional support. And I look forward to discussing the 2020 Census Operational Plan and other aspects of our planning with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cooper.
Chairman Meadows, Chairman Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, thank you for the opportunity to testify this afternoon. I am Steve Cooper, Chief Information Officer for the Department of Commerce. It is my pleasure to appear before the subcommittees and update you on our work as we prepare for a successful 2020 census. The Census Bureau is working to ensure the necessary information technology, or IT, is in place to support the 2020 census. The Census Bureau faces an increasing set of challenges, including declining survey participation rates, increased survey costs per household, funding constraints, and cybersecurity threats. These challenges all create risk for the 2020 census, and the Census Bureau has developed a multifaceted strategy that will address these challenges, will transform the business model, and modernize 2020 census operations. The 2020 census requires an IT architecture and infrastructure that is agile, flexible, scalable, and able to accommodate innovations and advances being introduced through IT. As the focus of the 2020 census shifts from planning to execution, our collective attention must include IT readiness. The Census Bureau has made significant progress in process improvements, IT governance, and closing the skill gaps to ensure it is ready for the 2020 census. One of the major enterprise initiatives supporting the 2020 census is the Census Enterprise Data Collection and Processing Initiative, what we call CEDCAP. The CEDCAP initiative aims to create an integrated and standardized suite of systems that will provide shared data collection and processing solutions across all Census Bureau operations. As the Census Bureau proceeds, It is working to ensure that it strikes the right balance between commercial off-the-shelf solutions and custom-developed solutions. In terms of mobile solutions, the Census Bureau is exploring a mix of device as a service and bring your own device for the 2016 census test. The test results will inform subsequent decisions on which mobile devices are leveraged in support of the 2020 census. In either mobile scenario defined, census data will be protected at rest and in motion. The Census Bureau is also exploring cloud computing technology. Various tests are underway to explore processing and storing data in some combination of various cloud infrastructures. For the 2016 census test, the Census Bureau will deploy the Internet Response Option in a secure, FedRAMP-certified, commercially provided private cloud. The Census Bureau is further exploring how to best employ features like auto-scaling to meet performance demands of the 2020 census, particularly for systems such as the Internet Self-Response option that must scale to meet the short-term anticipated demand of millions of users. In support of this work, the Census Bureau has awarded an initial cloud computing services contract. This contract will also allow the Census Bureau to gain essential skills and knowledge to be applied during all phases of delivering the 2020 census. Obviously, securing confidential data is a major concern for the Census Bureau. The Census Bureau uses an enterprise layered defense strategy to protect its data and systems. For example, the Census Bureau relies on the Department of Homeland Security managed Einstein program to protect external Internet traffic. And the Census Bureau's internal network is segmented to isolate the systems that are Internet accessible. The Census Bureau has also worked closely with NIST to implement a risk management framework for all of its systems. Each system also undergoes continuous monitoring to maintain its authorization. This monitoring consists of both automated and manual assessments. Finally, the Census Bureau continues to work with my office in their implementation of the Department of Homeland Security's Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program and our continuing ongoing cyber sprint effort. Based on my observations to date, the Census Bureau is well positioned to take advantage of early planning, testing, and operational designs. The 2020 Census Program is also poised to leverage enterprise initiatives to realize significant efficiencies. However, to adequately implement these strategies and meet the challenges will require the best efforts of the Census Bureau and continued congressional support. I am deeply grateful for this opportunity to testify before this committee and share these observations, and I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Goldenkoff.
Chairman Meadows and Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, and members of the Government Operations and IT subcommittees. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to discuss the progress the Census Bureau is making in controlling the cost of the 2020 enumeration. The Bureau's goal is to conduct the census at a lower cost per household than the 2010 census, adjusted for inflation, while maintaining accuracy. This would mean less than around $94 per household. It's an extremely difficult task as the population is growing steadily larger, more diverse, increasingly difficult to find, and less willing to participate in the head count. Moreover, the census is conducted on a tight schedule with little room, if any, for slippage. The Bureau plans to hold down costs in part by expanding its use of data that has already been collected by other government agencies in the course of administering their programs. Known as administrative records, such information can help improve accuracy and reduce the need for labor-intensive field operations, especially during one of the most expensive of all census activities, non-response follow-up. The Bureau has used administrative records in previous decennials, but not to the same extent as that planned for 2020. In my remarks today, which are based on a report we issued last month, I will describe the opportunities and challenges the Bureau faces in using administrative records and the steps it needs to take going forward to help ensure they produce the desired results. The Bureau estimates it can save up to $1.4 billion compared to traditional census-taking methods by using administrative records for three purposes during non-response follow-up. They include identifying and removing vacant and non-existing housing units from the follow-up workload before census workers start knocking on doors. Second, enumerating non-responding occupied housing units if the information meets a certain quality threshold. And third, predicting the best times to visit a household. Using administrative records for these activities can greatly improve productivity. For example, in a test conducted in Arizona's Maricopa County earlier this year, the Bureau reduced the follow-up workload by 11% by removing vacant and non-existent households. The Bureau is also exploring 9 additional applications of administrative records that may help reduce costs or improve quality still further. The Bureau currently has access to data held by the U.S. Postal Service, IRS, and Selective Service System, among other agencies. It's also considering other data sets, such as the National Directory of New Hires. The Bureau believes the NDNH and other records could improve its ability to find historically hard-to-count populations, such as certain minority groups and young children. However, the Bureau still needs to secure statutory access to the NDNH. The Bureau's planned use of administrative records is commendable, but much work remains. For example, in our October report, we recommended that the Bureau set deadlines to decide which, if any, of the 9 additional uses of administrative records still under consideration will be used in 2020. This will help ensure the Bureau has sufficient time to review the data sets, determine their fitness for use, and fully test them. Final decisions are needed by the end of fiscal year 2017 in order to be included in the Bureau's full end-to-end test in 2018. However, these deadlines do not appear in scheduled documents. The Bureau must also continue to address challenges to using administrative records, such as protecting confidential information and ensuring congressional and public acceptance of the Bureau's plan to share personal data across government agencies. Fully implementing our prior recommendations to strengthen the security of its information systems and developing a congressional outreach strategy could help address these challenges. In summary, the Bureau has made noteworthy progress in expanding its use of administrative records. Going forward, though, perhaps one of the biggest risks the Bureau faces is the ticking clock. Any delays could have serious implications for downstream activities. As a result, continued congressional attention will be needed to help ensure that the Bureau, 1, stays on schedule, 2, sets deadlines for key go, no-go decisions on additional uses of administrative data, and 3, fully implements our prior recommendations. This concludes my remarks, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Ms. Chaw.
Chairman Meadows and Hurd, Ranking Members Connolly and Kelly, and members of the subcommittees. I'd like to thank you for inviting me to testify today. It's your continued oversight in hearings like these that are vital to ensuring that the 2020 census is effectively managed. The Bureau will rely on an enterprise-wide IT initiative called CEDCAP to deliver the systems and infrastructure needed to carry out its redesigned operations. For example, CEDCAP is planning to deliver an online and a cloud computing solution to support. The program is planning to implement a new system to track and manage field work, as well as test the use of mobile devices for field data collection. Based on our work to date, I'd like to highlight 2 key challenges regarding the Bureau's plans for 2020. First, the deferral of key IT decisions in the face of time constraints. By August of 2017, the Bureau intends to begin preparations for end-to-end testing to validate that CEDCAP systems are ready to go live on Census Day. This gives the Bureau less than 2 years to develop and integrate planned systems. While the Bureau has made many key decisions about its redesigned census, as described in its October plan, there are critical IT decisions that have not yet been made, including whether the Bureau will build or buy the needed systems. This lack of prioritization of IT decisions has been a continuing trend, which we have reported on over the past few years. Most recently, in February, we reported that the Bureau had not determined how key research questions would be answered, such as the expected rate of respondents using the Internet survey or the IT infrastructure needed to support this option. As such, we made recommendations to improve the Bureau's ability to answer these questions in time to make those decisions in October. However, this has not happened yet. Furthermore, the Bureau does not intend to make these decisions and other key ones until 2016 through 2018. Among other things, the build or buy decisions won't be made until next June at the earliest. Based on the current sequencing of planned decisions, the Bureau will have about a year to develop and then integrate these systems and then have them ready for end-to-end testing. Further, the mobile device strategy for field work is not expected until 2 months after the start of this testing. Unless the Bureau makes these key decisions soon, it will likely run out of time to put SEDCAP systems in place. And I can refer you to the screenshot up above, which shows examples of deferred 2020 decisions overlaid on top of the census schedule. And again, if you look from left to right, the first one, the build or buy decisions, June 2016 at the earliest, and then we come up on the census end-to-end testing, which preparations begin in August of 2017. So again, there's very limited time to integrate and implement these systems in time for those tests. The second challenge is the Bureau's current IT posture. To its credit, important progress has been made to strengthen and institutionalize selected IT management areas, such as governance and requirements management. However, critical IT leadership gaps exist. Most notably, the Bureau is without a permanent Chief Information Officer. Other key vacancies include the Chief of the Office of Information Security and Chief Cloud Architect. The Bureau is aggressively working to close these gaps, but if they do remain open, its ability to effectively deliver SEDCAP will be hampered. In addition, the Bureau still has work remaining to fully address our recommendations to improve information security. In January 2013, we made 115 recommendations to address control deficiencies, such as access controls to protect its systems from intrusion. As of today, the Bureau has fully addressed 66 of them. The remaining open recommendations, of those, 30 require additional actions by the Bureau, and the other 19 are under review. Continued focus on completing this effort must be a high priority to ensure that sensitive information collected during the census is adequately secure. In summary, with a deferral of key IT decisions, the Bureau is running out of time to implement the systems needed to support the redesign and achieve its projected $5.2 billion in cost savings. Moving forward, swift actions to fully implement our open recommendations must be taken. Doing so will improve the Bureau's ability to deliver on its IT plans and realize savings. And that concludes my statement. I look forward to addressing your questions.
Thank you so much. The chair recognizes the chairman of the subcommittee on information technology, Mr. Hurd, for 5 minutes for a series of questions.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony today. And Ms. Cha, I want to thank you for your written statement. It was very good in helping to explain some of the unique challenges that we're having to provide oversight on. My first question, I guess, is first to you, Director Thompson. We've talked about the lack of a permanent CIO. We've talked about the lack of a chief of a business integration, which is managing the SEDCAP program. What are the plans to fill those spots? What are the challenges that you're facing in getting people there? And who's involved? Who's filling that role as a temporary basis?
Thank you, Congressman. So the job announcement for the CIO is out and available now. CIO Cooper and I have been widely circulating it so that we can ensure that we get a good number of applicants. Harry Lee is sitting behind me, has done an excellent job in the interim. He's the deputy CIO, and he's been doing a great job filling the vacancy in the absence, and we've made a number of accomplishments in the IT area.
How long have these spots been open?
It became open in July.
Okay. And we have applicants putting information in or submitting resumes or whatever the process is?
So I don't know that I can talk about the applicants at this point in the process.
Mr. Cooper, did you have something to add?
Yes. With the position open, it will remain open for 30 days. We'll then, our Human Resources Group will do the initial processing of those applicants, and those who are well qualified will be passed to the appropriate review panel, will then make that ultimate decision about selecting a CIO.
Because my concern...
So we've not yet seen any of the responses
Copy.
don't have any information on that.
Thank you. My concern is with the lack of the identified leader in managing this process. If SEDCAP is going to be the process and we have less than 2 years, we need to make sure that that person is in place. My next set of questions was 115 recommendations, as Ms. Cha pointed out in her written and verbal testimony. We have information that 19 of those 115 have been addressed, and work has started on 66, or 66 of those has been addressed. Can you give me an update?
Certainly. So last April, last April, we responded to all 115 recommendations that the GAO made. And we've been working with the GAO since that point. To date, we believe that they have closed 65 of them. We believe that they have referred 19 back to us, and based on our discussions, we're still waiting to hear from them on about 30 more. So that's the current status from our records.
Ms. Shaw, do you have any insights or comments on that?
Sure. So as of today, 66 have been closed out. But I believe Director Thompson has those numbers transposed. There are 19 that are currently under review, and there are 30 remaining recommendations that still require additional actions by the Bureau.
What's the biggest priority one of those 30 that require action?
Sure. So in terms of the open recommendations, they relate to the identification and authentication types of controls. So that would be like password controls, unsecured system accounts, and access, as well as configuration management. So that would be like patch management.
All the things that have led to a number of breaches, and not only in the private sector, but in the federal government.
That is correct.
And I'm going to address this to you, Mr. Cooper, since this falls in your bailiwick. What's being done to address that on the authentication and the patch management programs?
Okay, we've taken a couple steps proactively following the recent OMB 30-day cyber.
Let me rephrase the question. When is this going to be completed?
I wish I could give you an exact date. We have initiated a whole series of activities that are targeted for completion by 31 December of this fiscal year. Of this calendar year. That does include the open actions from the GAO report. We've also taken an additional step, and that is that we've created internal cross-bureau teams of our cyber experts, and we are bringing those to bear to assist all of our bureaus, but in this case, the Census Bureau, in helping close these actions. So in addition to the Census Bureau's cyber experts, we've brought additional expertise from within the department. We believe that that will help us both meet our target deadline and bring additional skills and expertise objectively to bear on these open items.
Thank you. And my last question to you, Director Thompson, and I'm running out of time. I've run out of time. If you realize savings from using new technology or a different process, are you able to use that savings within the calendar or the fiscal year on other projects?
Congressman,
And that's not a trick question.
No, I know it's not.
Because I'm trying to figure out if you're doing things that are able to use those savings to go back in to do your work.
So we are not going to be asking for anything more than the money we need to do the census. And we believe that we're going to avoid $5.2 billion in costs. And saying that, we also plan to make sure that we have the right resources in the right areas to make sure we count everyone as well.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I yield back the time that I do not have.
No, I thank the gentleman for his insightful questions. The chair recognizes the gentleman from the 11th District of Virginia, Mr. Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to point out, I think 3 of our witnesses are Virginians, and all 3 confirmed under oath that they voted. Now, Mr. Thompson, where are you from?
I'm from Old Town Alexandria.
All right, so you're a Virginian. All right, all 4. God bless them. Wonderful people doing wonderful work, let's just be honest. Anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, I want to say to all of you on the panel, you got 4 people up here who actually care about the mission and are focused on it and not allowing a lot of extraneous issues to get in our way of trying to be supportive in a rational way. And I would just note that because I really appreciate my friend, Ms. Kelly, and Mr. Meadows, Mr. Hurt, for really being in a collaborative spirit, and we're collaborating, and especially a lot of other IT issues too. I just want to say that because it doesn't happen as often as we'd like up here, and it hardly ever gets recognized when it does. And so I hope we can take this as a magic moment and try to work together with the executive branch on the census. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Director Thompson, help us understand, how much money do you believe the census requires to undertake its mission this next time? We're trying to follow the numbers.
So we estimate that we're going to, for the full cycle cost of the census is in our operational plan, that we're going to require $12.3 billion.
12.3. And is that what you requested in the budget?
Well, we request the budget on a yearly basis.
I know.
So we are moving towards that with our request for FY16.
And what do you project right now, the shortfall between the request? I think I cited $375 million, but that's probably just for 1 year. What is the shortfall between what you need and so far what's been appropriated or what you project to be appropriated?
Congressman, I think you had hit the number on the head when you mentioned the shortfall that we initially saw for FY16. However, we haven't seen the final appropriation
But
for
we haven't either.
FY16.
We haven't either. Are you able to disaggregate, for the purposes of funding the census, what you think you would get appropriated pursuant to the new budget agreement we passed last week? We increased domestic discretionary investments by roughly $25 billion for this next fiscal year, in that 25 for defense, 25 for domestic. Any idea how much of your projected shortfall in an ideal world? I know it's hard because we haven't appropriated it yet, but any sense of whether that would help the funding shortfall?
Congressman, the only numbers I'm familiar with are the President's budget and the actions that have taken place.
Okay, well, I think it's going to be really important to follow that and have better answers. Not that I can't ask you to have a better answer yet. We don't either. But if the four of us are going to be helpful and supportive.
Right, but we are prepared to work with the Congress to explain exactly how we'll spend every dollar that we get and what
there was
we'll get done.
method
and
to
what
my
won't.
madness in telling you got 4 people here who actually want to get something done and be productive, and part of that is the budget. But we got to know, we've all got to be on the same page in terms of those projected numbers. Mr. Cooper, thank you for your leadership as CIO. Would that we could replicate you in lots of other federal agencies. Help us have confidence. In 2010, we had a handheld device meltdown. We're doubling down on those devices for this next go-around. What makes us confident that we're in fact going to make it work and save money as opposed to another meltdown only double?
Okay. First observation would be that in 2010, and I was not part of the department in 2010, so the information I'm sharing is information I've gained since coming on board. If I don't get something exactly right, or if you need more detail, I'm more than happy to come back up, set up briefings, fill in the details. But based upon what I've investigated and what I've kind of been involved and learned, the first important difference, the technology that was used or attempted to be used in 2010 was very specific, specialized, proprietary technology. Now, compare and contrast that. In 2020, we're using commercially available solutions. They're off the shelf. They've been proven in industry. We're talking about smartphones, mobile devices. I think probably every one of us in this room carry some type of phone, smartphone type of device. We may carry a tablet, that type of thing. So a huge difference. This is not unproven, single-use proprietary technology. What also comes with that? Industry itself, all of the carriers, major telecom carriers, as well as the device providers, have invested significant amounts of expertise, research and development dollars into helping secure those devices. So again, this is not something where the Census Bureau by itself takes the lead responsibility along with its industry partners. That's a huge, important, significant difference in my ability to say to you with confidence, we're not repeating a similar type of scenario. We're using proven technology, well understood, well proven in the marketplace. We are then additionally applying our own NIST-driven security protocols, risk framework, cybersecurity framework, GAO recommendations, IG recommendations all come into play so that we have a significantly higher degree of confidence in being able to use those platforms in field operations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Blum, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Chairman Meadows. Thank you to the panel today for sharing your insights with us. They say that genius is the ability to reduce the complicated to the simple. And it'd be great to have a little genius in the federal government. So toward that end, Mr. Cooper, do we have a database of all the addresses in the United States of America?
My understanding is the closest we have to that in the Census Bureau is the master address file. I believe that in addition to that, there are supplemental databases that also, administrative records that the Director has talked about in some of the earlier GAO testimony. Therefore, I'm going to say, but I'm going to ask for help from my fellow panelists, I don't believe that there is a single master file of every housing unit in the United States, but is that in the master address file?
Would the Postal Service have that?
Can I respond?
Absolutely.
We maintain a master address list that we try to make as accurate as possible, that contains every address in the United States, both mailable addresses and those that aren't mailable. And we're in the process now of continuously updating it. So we work with the states and localities that want to participate and take their lists and put into it. Twice a year, at least, we get a feed from the post office, and they give us updates to their delivery sequence file. So we try to maintain this address list and make it as accurate as possible so that when we take the census, we have every housing unit in there.
Safe to say we have 99% of the addresses in the country in the postal system's database? 98%, high percentage?
So we actually believe that we have an address list that is a little more complete than the post office's list, because we actually go into structures that don't receive mail and list the addresses. And part of what we're going to do before the next census in about 25% of the country is actually go knock on doors, ask if there are hidden addresses, to make sure that we get every address in the country where someone can reside, whether or not they get mail at that address.
And your job is to count the number of people living at each address, correct? Simply put?
Yes.
I just want to make sure, maybe I'll ask Mr. Cooper this. Do you think we're unnecessarily complicating this? I come from the high-tech industry, the private sector. I know how this can go.
My direct answer would be no, sir, I don't believe that we are overly complicating it. But here is what's going on. We're moving from pencil and paper processing to leveraging technology in a more fully automated way. So the transition is complicated, complex, and we need to manage that extremely well and extremely rigorously and thoroughly. But I do not believe that we are making it more complicated than it needs to be.
Mr. Cooper, I think it's called CEDCAP.
Yes, sir.
I read there was a mention of the last census. I believe we had over 100 duplicative systems. To me, that's A, amazing, and B, a recipe for disaster. How are we changing that this census?
CEDCAP, I admit, Congressman, I don't know the exact number, so I accept the numbers that you're saying on what did exist and the number of duplicative systems. Here's the really good news. CEDCAP, in fact, architected, engineered, and it is well along the way to replace all of those, at least as many as are appropriate, and the concomitant operations. To replace that with a single, architected, well-understood, not complicated environment, ecosystem, if you will, that will serve all data collection and all operational processing of that data in the conduct of the 2020 decennial.
And the last thing, my time is running short. As I was reading, it seems to me the largest savings is in the non-response follow-up organization, $2.5 billion in savings, which would be fantastic. The wording in there said that we've developed or are developing a prototype system that incorporates commercial off-the-shelf technology, which I think is great, rather than developing it custom. Can you talk to me about that?
As much as I've been fully briefed and I understand what I've been told, which are two different things, the fact that we are using commercial off-the-shelf solutions is certainly something that I, in my CIO role, are fully supportive of. Based on your reflection on your background, I fully concur with you. By using commercially proven off-the-shelf software, same thing that I testified just briefly about the mobile devices, mobile technology, that type of thing, those same benefits apply. Okay, we have proven technology. We've got a lot of additional expertise that's been brought to bear. It usually incorporates architected security features that we then can take advantage of. They're well-known, well-proven across industry. Wherever we can, and it's in the operational plan that was recently shared with Congress and released publicly, we are leveraging commercial off-the-shelf software and solutions.
Excellent. And I'll yield back the time I do not have, Chairman Meadows.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Kelly, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The SEDCAP program is intended to help the cost-saving effort for 2020. Mr. Cooper, your written testimony for today's notes at SEDCAP, and I quote, aims to create an integrated and standardized system of systems that will offer shared data collection and processing across all Census Bureau operations, and you seem very positive about the program. Ms. Cha, what steps should the Bureau take to ensure that SEDCAP systems are ready for planned end-to-end testing?
Sure. So with SEDCAP, the system of systems approach, there are 12 projects underneath it. And, what we find across the federal government with these troubled or failed IT projects, the common thread behind all of these is that they're simply too large in scope. And so obviously, with FITARA and the best practices that GAO endorses, going incremental is the right approach. You want to chunk out these large scoped efforts into these smaller pieces that are more manageable in nature. So in looking at the scope of SEDCAP itself, it's simply too large given the time remaining. And the concern that we have from GAO's perspective is we're getting to a point where time is going to drive the technology that can be delivered for 2020 as opposed to business requirements. So the absolute first thing that the Bureau should be doing is to make these key IT decisions as soon as possible.
And what would be the effect if the Bureau does not have SEDCAP systems in place before end-to-end testing begins? Right.
Well, the end-to-end testing is absolutely critical, ensuring that in terms of an effect, most recently the most high-profile effect that we have seen is healthcare.gov, where they gave short shrift to that end-to-end testing. And so if the schedules keep compressing and move to the right, then we very well could have another healthcare.gov on our hands.
Mr. Thompson, do you disagree with that?
Yeah, first, overall, we absolutely concur with our GAO colleagues. We're doing some very specific things, including applying learning from healthcare.gov. I would agree with Ms. Cha that a significant failure was the lack of comprehensive end-to-end testing. I think exactly the right type of approach, and it does accommodate the recommendations coming from GAO. First, one way to think about how we're going at SEDCAP is it's a building block approach. I mean, playfully, think Legos. We're creating modules, and we are thoroughly, both architecture around each of those modules or building blocks are then being brought together. But we know where the integration of these building blocks occurs. We have both unit testing and system testing for each of these building blocks, and they are being tested again. So we have full time. I admit we have to stay on schedule. If we slip schedule, that's a risk, and I can share what we're doing to prevent that and to accommodate it if it should occur. But most important, we've built into our plan a very aggressive and rigorous iterative approach, agile approach, so that we're not building out the entire solution before we test anything. We're testing as we go. The likelihood that we will miss any fatal error becomes significantly reduced by this approach. Then when we kind of add and test, add and test, add and test, and when I say add, it's additional functionality, additional capability, what we end up with is significantly reduced risk as we move toward our end-to-end testing.
Okay. Mr. Thompson, any other comments?
No, I agree with Mr. Cooper. We enjoy the relationship we have with the Department of Commerce and the governance process that we have in place. I would say one thing I was fortunate enough to have been the career person at Census, and we successfully delivered a number of very, very complicated IT systems that were state-of-the-art at the time. When I went to NORC in Chicago, we also put in place some very, very sophisticated IT systems. So I have a lot in working with creating IT systems that work. And that's one of the reasons I came back to the Bureau, because I saw an opportunity to realize technology to save the government a significant amount of money and improve accuracy.
According to the operational plans, the Bureau will begin preparations for end-to-end testing of all systems in operations August 17th. Is that accurate? 2017?
That's accurate. We refer to it as a 2018 test because the census day is April 1st, 2018, but we have to start in preparations in 2017. So,
okay. I yield back also the time I don't have.
I thank you. Mr. Cooper, let me follow up on, you indicated that one of your concerns was that it was a proprietary technology, the handheld technology of our previous fiasco, I guess is how I would characterize it, and that somehow because we now have smartphones that's going to fix the problem. We had smartphones in 2008. At least we did in North Carolina. I assume you did here in Virginia. So if that's the case, it's not really a hardware problem. It's something a lot more significant than that.
I would agree with you. What I meant by a proprietary solution is that we were building an integrated hardware platform that was unique.
Who was building it?
Census Bureau and Harris Corporation was the prime contractor on that integrated solution.
So when it failed, who pointed the finger at whom?
I would have to defer to my colleagues. I was not present in the Department of Commerce at the time, and I don't know the answer.
If I see somebody smiling behind you, maybe you can ask him.
Okay.
You know, he was apparently. Oh, you've got that, Director Thompson.
So I actually was involved in the issue. I was called by Secretary Gutierrez to be on a special panel that gave him recommendations, so I did look at it. And it seemed like that there was a lot going on both sides in terms of defining and agreeing on what the specification should have been. But the big problem was they were trying to invent a hardware technology that just didn't exist.
But aren't we trying to do? We're trying to develop an app now for an iPhone, or I don't want to say iPhone, Android, whatever it is. I mean, I can see that the endorsement comes. Is that what we're trying to do? Is develop an app?
Yes,
Who's trying to
the
develop?
difference,
Because here's my concern. We're talking about all this testing that's going on. How do we test something that we haven't even decided what the design is all about? I mean, I don't buy that we're testing.
that's fair. In this case, what we actually are already operationally field testing is the following. We're using a well-proven, my remarks, a well-proven platform. Think of the smartphone.
Okay, so
as
we're
a
using a
platform.
smartphone.
All right. We have developed, it's already developed. We have a
You've
developed
got an app.
application.
So I
Yes,
could
sir.
download the app on my phone today.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir. So the field testing, most recently in Scottsdale, Arizona, and it's planned now for several additional broader locations, the application rides on a proven platform rather than that integrated, single hardware integrated with proprietary software that we did in 2010. Very different approach, architected very differently. It allows us to do a couple very important things. First of all, with a proven technology platform, what we really are focused on is, as best we're able to, industry plus best practice, industry best practice, our best practices, secure the platform itself. More importantly, the application is about collecting the data. We now have the ability to separately go after securing the application, access to the application, and then securing
I
the
get to
data.
all that. Let me cut to the chase.
Please.
Here is my concern. Looking at your time frame and how it's already moved to the right, and looking at when we will be testing it and when you will go out with your RFP for whether you build it or somebody else builds it, we're running out of time. And if we're sitting there worried about how a handheld device is collecting the very simplest of data, and I come from where Google headquarters, all your data is stored in my district. And so if that's what we're working on at this point, that's like saying we're working on the steering mechanism for a car, believing that the car is going to work okay. It may steer okay, but it may not run. And so that may be a crude analogy, but we have to be a lot more end-to-end in terms of what we're trying to do. And my concern is, from a technology standpoint, we're nowhere close other than conceptual. And I see some heads shaking no, so they're saying that that's inaccurate. So go ahead, I'll give you this chance to, I'm sorry I keep reading body language behind you, but go ahead.
We don't have the advantage of seeing behind, but I can see it in the reflection of my glasses.
You must not be a parent. We have eyes in the back of our heads.
I'm a parent, but my kid, my youngest kid's 30 years old. So.
Yeah.
All right. Now, go ahead.
So we have already built a prototype system and tested it in the field, and we are
For the data collection.
for the data collection and for the control, and we built that system using basically existing technology and existing software from vendors. And we only put our parameters into it. We didn't invent new software. The big decision we have to make is, do we scale up this prototype to do the whole census, or do we buy a solution to scale it up? But we already have defined the requirements for what we need. That's the beauty of this prototype. So we have the requirements for what the device has to do, and we have engaged the Carnegie Mellon Software Engineering Institute to help us make the right builder-buy decision and put that solution.
But Director, how is that different than what we had in 2008? Because we had a defined technology. It was proprietary, given that, so maybe it was not proven. But how is it different than that?
So in 2008, they didn't have the specifications.
So we designed something with not knowing.
They were still trying.
You've got to be kidding me.
They were still trying to design the specifications.
Okay. All right, Ms. Shaw, let me come to you. What am I missing here in terms of, do you have concerns?
We do have concerns, and Chairman Meadows, to be clear, the systems that they're talking about at this time are the applications. These are all prototype systems. And again, in terms of scaling it to the production needs for 2020, we do have concerns that, given the available time remaining, that hardening those prototypes so that they meet 2020, that's not an assumption. I think that's a dangerous assumption to make, that these prototype systems will be in place. But I think for the key lesson learned from 2010 coming out of that, it's that that the Bureau underestimated the technical complexity associated with those handhelds. And so even though they are not developing new devices, that lesson is still important in looking at the total magnitude of what they are intending to do with the operational control system to manage the field work, with the internet response option, with the devices that ultimately will be deployed. When you look at this collectively in the remaining time, I think it's fair for the Bureau to, again, make decisions now, take steps to reduce scope, take things off of the table so that they're positioned for success.
All right, I'm out of time. Let me just share this. We want you to succeed. But the other thing that Mr. Conley and I and Mr. Hurd and Ms. Kelly, we don't want egg on our face. And there is no way that I'm going to allow this to continue to progress without certainty. Mr. Cooper, one of the problems I see is the lack of specificity in terms of deadlines and what is to be accomplished by those deadlines. So I'd ask that you work with the committee on providing that. And ultimately, you're going to have 4 people, as Mr. Conley said, willing to go and fight for appropriations and get you the tools. But lack of planning and lack of strategic implementation is something that we don't want to find 6 months, 12 months from now where we're spending a lot of money going the other way. I'm going to recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hopefully I can take some liberties with the time just to share with you and the rest of the committee that for the 2010 census, I was sitting in your chair. I chaired the Oversight Committee. And when we ran into the issue with the handheld, it cost the taxpayers quite a bit. It doubled the cost of the 2010 census compared to the 2000 census. And it was a mistake that should have been avoided, but wasn't. And so hopefully we have learned from that mistake. Let me, and according to GAO, fundamental weaknesses in key IT management practices contributed to the Bureau not being able to successfully deploy custom-developed handheld enumeration devices for non-response follow-up, which increased the cost of the census by up to $3 billion. GAO has reported that the Bureau faces a number of challenges with, and I quote, developing and deploying the information technology systems and infrastructure it plans to rely on to conduct the significantly redesigned 2020 census. Ms. Cha, is that correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Cooper, what is your response to that assessment?
I think as we have stated, first, we agree with the GAO recommendations. We are working diligently to respond to all of those recommendations. We've shared some of the numbers and the status with you. We'll continue. You have my commitment. We'll continue to keep all of you informed of this status as we move forward. I heard Chairman Meadows loud and clear over addressing the concern over lack of decision deadlines, same point made by GAO. I hear it. I will certainly personally take the commitment to address it, working with my Census Bureau colleagues. I think that's the quick summary of the approach, and I'm more than happy to come back, dive into detail, and add any additional information that would be helpful.
All right, okay. Now, let me address the next one to Mr. Cooper. And let me preference this by saying this is 2015, and if I'm correct, this is the time to ramp up to get ready for the 2020 census. And Mr. Thompson, I heard you loud and clear that this is not the time for Congress to be playing tricks and using smoke and mirrors with the Census Bureau's budget, because this is ramp-up time. This is time for you all to be prepared to eventually get to 2020 and conduct this census successfully and to eliminate the undercounts and the overcounts. But Mr. Thompson, in April 2014, GAO reported that the Bureau had not prioritized key IT research and testing needed for its design decisions. How do you respond to that?
So what we have done is we've been working very diligently to do research and testing. We started in 2013 when the Bureau, that's before I got there, the Bureau had some budget cuts, and they reprioritized their whole entire research program. And importantly, they established a key milestone, which was for the beginning of fiscal year 16, this past September, that they would release an operational plan that did two things. It laid out as many key decisions as could be made, and importantly, laid out a process for making the remaining decisions. And we have, at the Bureau, done that. We released an operational plan. It lays out a schedule. It lays out a schedule for making our key decisions, leading up to an integrated end-to-end test in 2018. Well, Census Day is 2018. It starts in 2017.
Sure. Let me, Mr. Chairman, may I talk to Mr. Goldencoff, because he and I were involved in the 2010 census. Do you see anything we need to be watching out for going from this timeline forward that are similar to what we experienced in the 2010 census?
Yes. I think that both the Census Bureau, the Department of Commerce, and both subcommittees need to be extremely sensitive to the early warning signs. And I think that some of those early warning signs were not heeded back in the lead up to the 2010 census. For example, GAO had pointed out a number of issues with the handheld device beginning, I believe, in 2006. There were yellow flags being raised all over the place, and there was just a tendency, I think, for the Census Bureau to perhaps discount some of those concerns. I think the environment is much better now. The Census Bureau is much more responsive to recommendations from us, to your oversight from the IG's office, but we just need to be sensitive to those early warning signs. Delays are, concerns about the lack of time. They're starting to crop up. Funding issues need to make sure that the Census Bureau has reliable funding throughout the course of the decade. It's not only the actual amount of the money that they get, obviously that's important, but uncertainty is also an issue too. So those are some things that right now, while there's still time, we all need to be sensitive to.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your
I thank the gentleman for his insightful questions, and the chair recognizes Mr. Grothman, the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions here. Over time, I think, insofar as garden variety legislator gets calls about the census, it's about some of the questions that are asked, not about the census every 10 years, but I don't know what you call them, these more broad questionnaires that get sent out, correct? What do they call them, the broader?
The ACS?
Are you referring to the American Community Survey?
Yeah, yeah. How long do you retain the information on those surveys?
Since they're part of the decennial census, we retain a permanent record of them, and 72 years after they're collected, then they can be made available to the American public.
You mean they're even going to make those available sometime, even 72 years?
In 72 years, yes, sir.
What are we doing to make sure? I mean, some of those things, when I get questions, they wonder why isn't any of the government's business. And while it hasn't necessarily been your organization, certainly other governmental organizations have not been able to protect their data. Maybe that's an impossible thing to do, but I'm just saying you got to realize that when you fill out a government form, there's a possibility that some country will know what's on it. Are you doing anything? I'll put it this way. On those community surveys, is there any reason why that stuff has to be held more than 3 or 4 years? I understand, it's kind of cool that I can look up and find great-grandfather was living wherever in 1880. But beyond that, there's stuff here that people don't want to have let out. So I'll ask you again, why, given that I would assume sooner or later you're going to have a breach of your database, every other government agency seems to, is there any reason why you personally feel that if I fill out a form, some information of which may be considered somewhat personal, or at least I don't want everybody to know, any philosophical reason why that stuff has to be kept around?
As I said, we at the Census Bureau believe it's very important that we maintain a record of the census and make that available in 72 years. Now, the Census Bureau takes security and privacy of our information very, very seriously, and we could go into great lengths about the how we go about protecting the PII of our respondents and how we have a number of layers between that in any way to get to it. And so that's job one. Plus, we have some really severe penalties in place if there's willful disclosure of any kind of information.
Well, I'm sure that the IRS takes their responsibilities seriously, and whatever our equivalent of human resources is, takes their responsibilities seriously. And I realize that we want to keep the bare bones minimum of the census available out there. Like I said, we should maybe always know that, Glenn Grothman in 2020 is living in Glen Beulah, Wisconsin. But why are we keeping all this more personal stuff? What is the sense of keeping that available for either some hacker to get a hold of it or even some busybody to look at it in 70 years?
Congressman, we are actually mandated by law, and don't ask me the specific site. I'll be happy to get it to you, to maintain those records as part of the decennial census.
Okay, but you don't have opinion on it personally?
My opinion is to do the census, as the Congress shall direct. So that's basically my opinion.
Okay. I'll give you one more question here, which is kind of the party question. We still don't know whether you're going to use the NDNH or the Kids Link sources. When are you going to decide whether you're going to use those or not, or what is going to determine whether or not you're going to use them? Have access to them?
So we're going to make our final decision on the exact administrative records we'll use, which will be in 2018, and that would include whatever we've been able to put together, and that's when what we're going to go forward with. We're not going to change after that point.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes a gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman and ranking member for calling this important hearing and all of the participants today. The census is mandated in the United States Constitution. It's a requirement illustrated right in the Constitution, and historians constantly refer to it, documents refer to it in ways that help us understand our history and understand our country. And I'm glad that we're focusing on it, because if we don't have good data, if we don't have a good census, then we don't have good policy. I would also say the census is relied on by more and more by businesses and others to understand our country, where we are, where we're going, what our needs are. And I would say the allocation of federal funds is dependent on census data, as is oftentimes public policy in general, and it's incredibly important. But that said, I want to really associate myself with the comments of the prior speaker on the importance of keeping it confidential. It's a critical trust that this be kept confidential until 70 years later. And I do want to cite that there happens to be a Broadway play playing right now in New York on a violation of the census data during World War II, where the census data was used to round up Japanese Americans and place them in detention camps. Probably the worst chapter of the census in the history of our country, that our sacred data that we pledge will be confidential was violated. So that was a bad era, but I don't want to go back to to cybersecurity, and that we have to take this cybersecurity seriously. And I want to say that in light of a recent cyber incident at the Bureau, I want to better understand the data controls currently in place. I don't believe that the census would ever give up data in this day and time, willingly. I don't believe that at all. I think it's totally confidential. But I am concerned about cyber incidents. And I'd like to ask Mr. Thompson, the Director, on July 24th, you issued a statement confirming that the Bureau, and I'm quoting for you, experienced an attack to gain access to the Federal Audit Clearinghouse. And can you first explain to us what is the Federal Audit Clearinghouse? And your statement went on to say, while our IT forensics investigations continue, I want to assure you that at this time, every indication is that the breach was limited to this database and that it did not include personally identifiable information provided by people responding to our consensus and surveys. So your comment, please, on that.
Thank you. So that is a database, what we call a web-facing database that we maintain that sits between our firewall and the outside. And so that database was maintained for people to put certain types of information in, which is non-sensitive information. And that's the database that unfortunately got breached. We've taken steps since then, which Mr. Cooper can explain better than I can because he's more of an IT person, to rectify their problem. But importantly, we also have safeguards that will not let anything past our firewall, which will get to the personally identified information at the Census Bureau. And that was not breached in that circumstance.
Can you share with us the results from the forensic investigation, Mr. Cooper?
Yes, ma'am, I can.
And what steps have you taken to prevent a similar cyber incident in the future?
Okay. First, what our forensic analysis has shown to date is that gives us the timeline of the attack and the source addresses from which the attack was launched, both.
Where do you think it came from? Where do you think the attack came from?
In this environment, could I maybe follow up and get with you all in a different physical environment to discuss that with you, please?
Okay, thank you.
If you'd allow me to do that. Now, we've also worked very, very closely with our colleagues at the FBI and with the Department of Homeland Security so that that becomes part of the intelligence community environment. That helps us at the Census Bureau. It helps our colleagues across the Federal Government. So there's the first part that I can answer in this setting today. Second part, we have indeed installed new security measures, and let me give you a quick summary of those. First of all, we're in the process of implementing web application scanning capability that we did not have broadly in place at the time of that breach. We've also included funding in our FY16 budget to bring the cybersecurity company we used in FY15, we in this case being the Census Bureau, back to do another scan. And I have instituted as the CIO regular scanning. We have reached out to some other federal departments to assist us with what's called blue team assessments, blue team attacks, which are friendly attacks against our environment to help identify threats and vulnerabilities that we may not have uncovered ourselves. We're also actively engaged with our colleagues at the Department of Homeland Security. We have fully implemented all available Einstein precautions to enhance and strengthen our cyber scanning capability to identify threats and critical vulnerabilities. We're working very closely with the Department of Homeland Security to implement as part of what's known as Phase 2 of the Continuing Diagnostics and Mitigation Program of DHS. We are now working, and we will be deploying additional CDM capability, more scanning and software tools, sensors in our networks. All of this strengthens our environment and enhances our capability from the time of the breach even till now, and will continue to do that going forward.
Well, my time has expired, but in writing, the controls the Census Bureau has in place to protect this collected data. I think it's very important, and people want to know that their data is protected, as the gentleman mentioned earlier. I thank you, and I yield back.
And just for planning purposes, we're going to have a very brief second round of questions, and by very brief, only a few members, I think, are going to participate in that. So the chair will recognize the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Hurd, for a series of questions.
Gene Dodaro is going to get mad at me for asking this question, but Ms. Cha, you know, I hear there's a position available at the Bureau, the Census Bureau, for Chief of Business Integration. Would you be interested in taking a sabbatical to take that position? I think you'd be well positioned for that. But Mr. Cooper, Mr. Thompson, so if I understand this correctly, you're basically crowdsourcing people to answer some, you know, to get better information, have them get that information into you. We didn't even get to, you know, ask many questions, and not knowing how many people you expect to respond to that. That's going to drive your technology decisions and the infrastructure 2 years out. That's difficult. But let me understand this, you know, bring your own device or buying a new device. Are we talking about buying actual smartphones that have the app already on there with the security systems established, or are we talking about a new designed device that's not a smartphone, but it's used specifically for y'all? I'm confused.
Okay, in this case, it would be the former of your two scenarios.
Okay, so it's a smartphone that everyone's going to use, and when are you going to make the decision on
that would be option one.
Okay, and
that would be a government furnished device. Option two would be bring your own device, and we will then load the image
and when are you
software.
making this decision on which?
September 2016.
September 20. How many months is that?
It's about not quite a year from now.
So why 12 months? Why that long to make a simple decision that's going to drive your entire plan?
That allows us to complete the planned and already in motion, in process set of field operation tests, so that we can make both an economic-based determination as well as a security-based determination and include privacy and functionality.
I recognize the privacy and security concerns of having people bringing their own device and, you know, uploading that information onto some system or server that touches all your databases. But this is not a new technology, right? Everybody on this platform have probably walked at some point in time, and this is just block walking on steroids. And, you know, I represent a very rural part of Texas that doesn't have cell phone service, and, you know, we were still be able to do that. So the necessity to have a year of testing a technology and a process that is used pretty significantly is shocking to me. And that's something that I'd love to continue to talk about at another time. I have two final questions, separate issue. It's my understanding that missionaries and other individuals temporarily overseas with a clear intent to return would not be included in the census. Is this correct?
Congressman, we are in the process right now of determining the residence rules that we will use for the 2020 census. Recently, we sent out the rules that we use for where to count people, who to count in 2010 for public comment. We received a number of comments, and we're now in the process of responding to those comments, and we will then issue our plan for 2020. In the last census, if someone was permanently away from the United States, we did not count them in the United States.
Okay. We would welcome your documentation and writing on this process. It's important to a number of members. And also on the 112th Congress, Senator Hatch and Representative Bishop introduced companion bills requiring that all citizens of the United States temporarily living abroad at the time of the census be counted and attributed to the state they had most recently lived in. This legislation also provided for the use of administrative records to assist in the count. Can you describe any concerns you have with this legislation? And we would love to see that in writing if y'all haven't done the analysis of that.
At this point, I'd have to respond to you in writing. and
Thank you
be
very
happy to
much.
do
I yield back, Chairman. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. The chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Connolly, for a series of questions.
Thank you. Ms. Cooper, these are, I hope, brief answers to brief questions. Following up on Ms. Maloney's questioning, you mentioned Einstein. Part of the problem with the breach at OPM was Einstein 3, I believe, was not yet fully implemented. Are we at Einstein 3 for the census?
We are where our telecom providers have already put the Einstein 3 capabilities in place.
Good.
There is one telecom provider is not quite at Einstein 3.
Okay, good to know.
The answer is yes.
Secondly, in response to, I think, Mr. Blum's questioning, I think you acknowledged that there could be roughly 100 different systems, I guess, at Census or Commerce?
That would be census.
Census. Presumably, some of these are legacy systems.
Know the quantitative breakout.
How-
I can follow up and
Some of those systems do not lend themselves as a result to encryption. Is that correct?
that is correct in some cases.
So that makes them more vulnerable, not less vulnerable to hacking.
It's my understanding, and I'm going to defer, I'm going to ask over my shoulder to kind of make sure I don't misstate this. It's my understanding that while we do have legacy systems involved somewhere in that 112, it's my understanding that we don't have a situation where a legacy system that's directly involved in supporting census operations leading to the 2020 decennial is not able to be encrypted. Is that a valid statement? Okay. Yes.
Okay.
So that would not be a situation that we would run into in support of the 2020 census.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's it for now. Thank you very much.
Well, I want to close by thanking each of the witnesses here. I guess the most important thing, I was talking to the ranking member, what we would like to do is not in a hearing setting, but necessarily in a briefing setting, is set some regular updates, of which actually all four of you would be welcome for those regular updates. I think over the next 12 months, I see that as a critical window. And as much as we want to talk about 2020, I think the next 12 to 18 months is our go or no-go time frame. And so in doing that, to have quarterly briefings as to where we're making progress and where we're not, is everybody okay with doing that? I see, let the record show everybody nodded in the affirmative. And so, and Director Thompson, Mr. Cooper, thank you. Thank your staff for the work. I mean, sometimes it is only thought we have someone knocking at our door. There's obviously years of planning that go ahead of that time to make sure that it's done seamlessly. And we're going to count on 2020 being done seamlessly, and remiss in saying that many of the recommendations that the GAO are making or raising concerns, if they're not happy, I'm probably not going to be happy. And so I just want to stress that it is critical that we work hand in glove together because failure is not an option. And with that, thank each of you for your testimony here today. If there's no further business without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.